talk. Let's go now, though, to what's likely to be another tumultuous sitting week in Canberra for the Coalition. Parliament, as I said, set to resume tomorrow, certainly the House anyway. It's Senate budget estimates for everybody else. And joining me now to discuss what the week might look like, Sky's political contributor Chris Uhlmann. Let's start, if I can, with that shock resignation on Friday of Liberal frontbencher Andrew Hastie stepping down from shadow cabinet, citing not just Sussan Ley's decision to strip him of policy for immigration. I think that is just cack-handed, but also concerns he has with her direction on net zero.
Immigration is a core responsibility of Home Affairs, and so when it was made clear that I wouldn't have any leadership in that role, I thought it was time for me to depart, because essentially I want to be able to speak about immigration, which I think is a critical issue for a lot of Australians at the moment. I think what we're seeing across the world now is a move against net zero.
Chris, we mentioned the charter letters last week. They arrived in the middle of the week. They were about 4 months late anyway. But she took the extraordinary decision to strip out from Home Affairs the issue of immigration. Now, Tony Burke for Labor is the Minister for Home Affairs. He's front and centre on immigration. I think, as I said, it was cack-handed. I think she was spoiling for a fight. And I think she forced this issue on Hastie. And, I mean, he's got to act with integrity, I guess, and walk away. But I don't know what it is with the Coalition at the moment, but they are doing everything they can to make themselves the issue.
Well, look, there is a fight for the soul of the Liberal Party at the moment, and it's going to be over issues like this, Peter. And, you know, it's quite clear that whatever Sussan Ley imagined that Andrew Hastie was going to say about immigration was not going to sit particularly well with what she had to say about immigration, and you can only assume that that was going to be much more soft pedal. And I do believe that that perhaps misunderstands Andrew Hastie. I think that there is a real desire inside the community at the moment for a conversation on immigration. Not about where people come from, but just simply about there being too many too quickly. And that's evident in the figures that we see, and people are feeling the pressure on that. And I think that pressure is reasonably widespread. And I also do think that there is time to have a conversation about multiculturalism in Australia and what that actually means, and how we bring together this community to try and celebrate our unity rather than those things that divide us. And I'm pretty sure they're all the sorts of things that Andrew Hastie would want to discuss. Now, others in the Liberal Party do not want to discuss those things. They're living in fear of what the last election said. They're all interpreting what it might mean. And they worry about ethnic communities when, as you mentioned, some of these ethnic communities, I think, are up for this kind of conversation as well. And I'm assuming that somebody also said to Sussan Ley that if you do not act against Hastie, who's essentially unplugged on your front bench, then you'll look weak. So I'm guessing that all led to what we saw at the end of last week.
In practice, though, I mean, if he was handling the review into the policy for immigration, which he ordinarily would as the shadow for Home Affairs, all of that has to get tossed into an internal process. All of that comes through the shadow cabinet. Everybody has their say. So this looks to me as if she wanted to nobble him and bring on a fight. And I point to bobber boys like Alex Hawke, who machinates behind the scenes. This seems to me to be sort of a deliberate internal show of strength, and obviously it got to where it got to on Friday. But just your point there about some Libs say that these aren't issues that people are really that concerned about. And that's very much the tone of what Senator Andrew Bragg from New South Wales, leading moderate, had to say. He says that, this isn't core business for the Liberals, people aren't worried about it. But if you look at the last election, even under Peter Dutton, the Libs were backing in net zero. The Libs had very little to say about high migration. They backed in Labor. Well, look at the disastrous result. If you do the same thing the same time over and over again, wanting a different result, isn't that the definition of insanity? Isn't Hastie right to say, we're going to talk about this stuff?
Yeah, look, and I read Andrew Bragg's essay, and it was like the curate's egg, really. It was good in parts. I note that he says that essentially the problem is not migration when it comes to housing, it's a supply side problem. Well, if you can increase demand, then you've got a bigger problem with supply, right? So I think people get a bit tired of the fact that they keep getting told that migration has nothing to do with this. By his own figures, there's been 5 million people arrive in the last 25 years. If you look at the figures from the mix in the Australian population now, 31% of people in Australia are now born overseas. The equivalent number in the United States is 15%. And again, this is not talking about where people come from. It's just saying that there are too many people. It's putting pressure across the board on those frontline suburbs. And when he started to speak about net zero, again, I was a little confused because he talked about Labor's net zero not being any good, said that China was long on renewables, but also long on coal, pointed out that 39 other countries in the world are using coal and said we should use all of our resources. Now, that sounds a bit like what Matt Canavan is saying. Actually, it's not talking about net zero. It's talking about the fact that maybe we should burn some of that coal here. So I find the conversations that are being had very confused at the moment. Now, maybe the coalition must have this fight, but it is at risk of tearing itself to shreds and to cease to be, and it may well already be there at the moment, a party of government. And you compare that to what we saw from the Prime Minister today, who's actually signing a treaty of some significant value to Australia. And any punter who sees these two images knows exactly where they'll put their vote next time.
And look, if it was only as simple as a better costed and earlier defence policy to put, Peter Dutton into the lodge, well, more fool the Liberals. I mean, if that's what they think was the only thing that cost them the election in May, they're kidding themselves.
Oh, absolutely they are. And look, I assume that it's somebody who is in the orbit of Peter Dutton who briefed the newspaper today on that. And then they'd have to ask themselves the question, what value do they think is gotten out of any of this? Now, if they are determined essentially to simply kill their own at the moment, then division is death. We know that. This is the end of this party as we know it. Yeah,
I suspect it's more likely that review landed on the desk of someone in the New South Wales division, and it's so full of moderates that putting it out there looking like it's a green on blue attack from Dutton to another Conservative is, well, it's got them the desired result today. Newspoll, let's have a look at that. 28% primary vote. That's an improvement, really. It was 27 last time round. It's still in catastrophic territory. What worries me here, two things worry me. The flight of the base vote to One Nation. It surged to its highest level since 2017. That's not an anomaly. That's what we have seen over and over again in the UK with the Tory vote moving to Reform. And when Reform has a serious, credible prime ministerial type candidate, that vote locks in and does not go back to the Tories. So the Libs are in danger of people parking their vote, leaving their vote, then locking in their vote away from them. But also to, really high popularity for the Prime Minister, when you only need to get around the media a bit and listen to what people might even say on radio and what they're saying in the community, they're not that happy with him, but they don't have another option.
No, we've seen exactly this in Victoria, right? By any measure, the Allen government next year should be pushed out of government with a pointed stick, but that's not going to happen because of the fact that the people of Victoria really don't have an alternative. The Victorian branch of the Liberal Party is determined to sue itself out of existence. And at the moment, the federal branch is heading in the same direction, or the federal party is headed in the same direction. So, at the moment, the coalition looks all at sea. It does not look like a party of government or all alternative government, and it doesn't look like getting its act together in the short term. Now, eventually there's going to have to be some kind of settlement if the Liberals are to stay in any kind of position to govern again between the Conservatives and the small L Liberals in the party, because that's the only way you're ever going to have enough to get there. I see that drift off to One Nation, but if you add up 27% and 11%, even if all of the preferences flowed that way, you still don't get above 40% of the vote for us. But if you add up the Greens and the Labor Party, you start to get towards 50%, very close to it. So at the moment, what's got to happen is that they need to find a way to talk to aspirational voters and to tell them that there's something worth voting for, and particularly for the young. The other figure I'll say in closing, Peter, as I saw recently, is on a review of the Liberal Party, is that the average age is 72. That is the average age. Now, you've got to find a way to talk to young people and to women if you expect to have a future as a party of government in Australia.
And here they were thinking that just putting a woman in the top job will solve the woman's vote. I always said that is wrong-headed. I'll leave it there, Chris.